The origin of God. Who was God before creation? Before the universe began, before time ticked its first second, who was God? Silence. Not the kind you hear in a quiet room or between breaths, but the kind that lives before sound itself was born. Imagine a void so complete that even the idea of emptiness had no meaning. There were no stars, no dust, no echoes, just him. A breathless montage begins to stir, nebulae blooming across a black canvas like spilled paint, galaxies dancing into form, the pulse of a single heartbeat vibrating through eternity. Then it fades, quiet again, still. And in that stillness, a question, ancient and forbidden, rises. Did God exist in a void? Was he alone? If time had not yet begun, what was he doing before creation? The mind recoils. How can anything exist when nothing is? How can a being live without space, without sequence, without the passage of moments? Yet, here we are, facing the question humanity has dared to whisper since the beginning of its own fragile timeline. This is not just a question of theology or science. This is a question that reaches down into your soul, grabs hold of the roots of your belief, and pulls. Who is God when he has nothing to rule? Who is God when there are no angels to sing, no humans to pray, no worlds to govern? Strip away creation. What remains? Today, we will journey into that unfathomable stillness, past the veil of stars, beyond the first light, into the very mind of eternity itself. By the end of this video, your concept of God may never be the same. The problem of time existence. What does it mean to ask before time began? It sounds like a reasonable question. Our minds reach for answers the way lungs reach for air. But already, we're in trouble. Because to ask what came before time is to drag a clock into a place where no clock has ever ticked. Imagine trying to measure weight in a world with no gravity, or trying to draw a square in a realm without space. That's what happens when we use words like before or after when speaking of eternity. These are terms forged inside the furnace of time. They are shaped by sequence, built on cause and effect. Yet here, we are not in the realm of cause and effect. We are standing at the edge of existence itself. The visuals fade into deep space, black, silent, endless. Not because it's cold or distant, but because it's unmeasured. Here, there is no then. No sunrise, no ticking, no decay. Just as. This is where the human mind begins to tremble. Because we are time-bound beings. Everything we know, birth, growth, change, death, flows along the current of time. So, to step outside of it, to speak of something or someone who existed when time did not, it's like trying to see your own eyes without a mirror. Consider this. Time itself is not a separate thing from space. Albert Einstein shattered that illusion when he introduced the world to the idea of space-time. Space and time are not two things. They are woven together, like threads in a cosmic fabric. Move fast enough through space, and time slows down. Stand still, and time carries you forward. Gravity bends it. Mass influences it. In a very real sense, time is not absolute. It's relative, fluid, bending under the pressure of reality itself. But eternity does not bend, because it doesn't flow. It doesn't change. It doesn't move. It just is. And here's where the question becomes unsettling. If time had a beginning, if it started, then what does that say about the one who existed before it? Can we even say before? Do we have any language left for this space beyond sequence? Pause for a moment. Think about how bound we are by the limitations of our words, our thoughts, our categories. We are trying to fit something infinite into a box made for measuring cups, something without edges into a mind trained to search for them. Is it possible, just possible, that we are asking questions too big for our grammar? Is it possible that we don't lack the answers? We lack the tools to even ask the question right? And maybe that's the real mystery. Not that the answers are hidden, but we were never meant to find them using the tools of time. Because perhaps, just perhaps, time is not the highest reality. And we're only just beginning to see what that means. Picture this. Before anything ever ticked, before galaxies spun or atoms formed, before light had ever kissed darkness, there was existence. but not in the way we define it. Not measured in length or volume or duration. Not even in potential or progress. Just raw, infinite being. Not waiting to become something. Not suspended in a divine pause. Simply being. We reach for metaphors, an eternal ocean, a still light, a mind without motion. But every image we summon collapses under the weight of the truth. Because our minds weren't shaped to stand here. We evolved inside the current of time. And now we're asking fish to describe the desert. Even the idea of a start to time suggests a kind of border. A line. A moment when the clock was switched on. But that assumes a moment existed for that switch to be flipped. And if no time existed, then no moment existed either. It's maddening. And yet, somehow, this isn't chaos. It's precision. Everything we now know about physics, about the beginning of the universe, about the Big Bang and the expansion of space, all of it points backward toward a threshold, a singularity, a point where all laws as we know them collapse. Not break, collapse. Because beyond that point, time itself is not part of the equation. So when someone asks, what was God doing before he created the universe? The question is, perhaps, a category error. Like asking what the color blue smells like. The structure of the question itself unravels. But rather than this pushing us into confusion, maybe it invites us into awe. Because now, we are faced with something that doesn't just exist inside the universe, but outside it. Not being made of time. Not a mind trapped in cause and effect. But something, or someone, who authored time. As easily as an artist adds ink to a blank page. Imagine a being for whom time is the paint, and the canvas is eternity. And then you begin to realize, we are standing at the outer edge of comprehension. A place where science, philosophy, and faith all look over the same cliff. None of them can cross it fully, but all of them, in their own way, point and say, something is there. And it's there not in a moment, but in all moments. Not waiting to act, but existing as the source of all action. Not caught in the flow of time, but the fountain from which time flows. What we're glimpsing isn't the past. It isn't the future. It's something deeper, something older than age, wiser than thought, a presence untouched by entropy, decay, or sequence. This is the mystery of timelessness. And maybe, just maybe, the reason it escapes us isn't because it's far away, but because it is everywhere at once. And we're only beginning to awaken to what that means. What different belief systems say. Before the first tick of time, before space stretched into the vast unknown, before matter, motion, or even the idea of before itself, there was something, or perhaps nothing. And in that tension, across cultures and centuries, humanity has reached into the silence for meaning. We've wondered, if God exists, what was before him? Or was there ever a before to begin with? For those shaped by monotheistic belief, those who walk within the revelations of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, the question meets an immediate boundary. Not a limitation, but a sacred mystery. God, in these traditions, is not a being that emerged from anything. He is the being from which all things flow. Eternal, uncreated, outside of time itself. Genesis does not begin with God's origin. It begins with his action. In the beginning, God created, not in his beginning, but in ours. The Quran echoes this majesty. He is the first and the last, the ascendant and the intimate. A presence that envelopes the edges of existence. Judaism, with its ineffable name for God, YHWH, encapsulates being itself. A name so holy it defies simple definition. He simply is. Now, move eastward into the vast and layered world of Hindu thought, where the cosmos breathes in cycles, and divinity dances between form and formlessness. Here, the idea of a beginning is transformed. Brahman, the ultimate reality, is not a god in a throne room, nor a creator in the human image. Brahman is not bound by shape, name, or time. It is pure consciousness, silent and infinite, from which all forms emerge and to which all return. The Upanishads whisper of this mystery, that which is the subtle essence. In it all that exists has itself. It is the true. It is the self, and you are that. There was no before Brahman, Because Brahman is not a point in time. It is the still ocean beneath the waves of all reality. Then there are those who take a step back from personhood altogether. Philosophical deism imagines a divine intelligence, but not one with hands that sculpt or a voice that commands. Instead, God is a distant architect, a mind or force that lit the match and walked away. Pantheism goes further, dissolving the divide between creator and creation. Here, God is the universe. Every atom, every galaxy, every breath, divine. There's no beginning outside of God, because God is the unfolding of all beginnings. The divine is not behind the curtain. The divine is the curtain, the stage, the play, the actors, and the very breath of the audience. But not all accept this premise. To many atheists, the question itself unravels. To ask, what came before God, is like asking, what's north of the North Pole? If God does not exist, at least not in any observable, testable sense, then the entire framework of before and after collapses under its own weight. Reality, in this view, needs no architect. The universe is, and that is enough. Meaning, if it exists, is written not in sacred texts, but in human choices, in love, in pain, in the trembling reach toward understanding. And yet, despite these differences, despite language, culture, doctrine, each perspective reaches for the same horizon. Whether they call it God, Brahman, the universe, or nothing at all, they are reaching for the source, the still point, the spark, the silence before the song. Because whether we kneel in a mosque, meditate in a forest, sit in a pew, or stare at the stars in quiet defiance, we are asking the same question: what came before everything? And in that asking, maybe, just maybe, something sacred is already at work. Imagine for a moment that we step outside the limits of time, not just in theory, but in thought, in logic, in imagination. I want you to hold this question in your mind as if it were the only thing that mattered. Can something exist without a beginning? Don't answer too quickly. Let it challenge you. Let it unsettle you. Because what you're about to explore has tormented philosophers, theologians, and scientists alike for centuries. The human mind naturally seeks a starting point. We crave beginnings because beginnings suggest meaning, order, and structure. We ask, where did it start? With everything, our lives, our planet, our universe. But when we point that same question at existence itself, we begin to unravel. Let's consider the Kalam cosmological argument, a compelling philosophical stance that cuts deep into this very paradox. It says, first, that everything that begins to exist has a cause. Second, that the universe began to exist. And therefore, third, the universe has a cause. Clean, rational, intuitive. It seems to point with confidence toward a first cause, an uncaused cause, if you will. Something, or someone, who stands outside the chain of dependent things. Eternal, unmoved, necessary. But as with all profound truths, it doesn't rest without resistance. Critics of the Kalam argument don't simply argue the details. They challenge the very foundation of the logic itself. Some point to the mystery of quantum events, which seem to happen without clear causes. Others argue that the concept of beginning may not even make sense when applied to the whole universe, especially if time itself is part of that universe. Can you ask what happened before time, when before assumes the existence of time? It's a linguistic trap, a mental paradox. Now, picture an animation here. The screen loops endlessly, dominoes falling in a perfect circle, one triggering the next, but never revealing the first. This is infinite regress, a chain of causes stretching back forever, with no true starting point. Philosophically, it's a nightmare. If every cause is dependent on a previous one, and the chain has no end or beginning, then nothing would ever get started at all. Think about that. If there's no engine at the front of the train, how does the train ever move? This is why so many thinkers, from Aristotle to Aquinas, from Leibniz to modern-day cosmologists, insist on the necessity of a first cause. Not just a starter in time, but something fundamentally different. A being or reality that is necessary, not contingent. Something that doesn't just happen to exist, but must exist by its very nature. A source so absolute, so beyond the rules of created things, that it explains not only that the universe exists, but why there is anything at all rather than nothing. And yet, this leads to another deep tension. If we accept that there must be a necessary being, a cause that itself was never caused, then we are staring directly into the concept many call God. But here's where your mind is likely wrestling. You're not just asking, did God create everything? You're asking something far more primal. Did God have a beginning? And that is not a small question. That is a confrontation with the infinite. Take a moment. Consider what you truly believe. Not just what you were taught, not what you're supposed to say, but what resonates with the core of your logic, your spirit, your doubt, and your wonder. Because here's what I want you to do. Go down to the comments and answer with raw honesty. Do you believe God had a beginning? Let your voice join the hundreds, maybe thousands, who are grappling with the same paradox. There are no wrong answers here, only deeper questions. And sometimes, it's the questions that bring us closer to truth than the answers ever could. The concept of eternity. Imagine, for a moment, something beyond time. Something so profound, so utterly removed from the ticking of clocks and the setting of suns, that our language almost fails to grasp it. We use the word eternal so casually, as if it were just another poetic flourish to describe a long duration. But eternity, true eternity, is not about duration at all. It's not time stretched out forever. It's the complete absence of time as we know it. No ticking, no aging, no becoming, just being. To be eternal means there was never a starting point, no origin to trace back, no genesis to analyze. It means there is no future moment waiting in the distance, no eventual conclusion, nothing to wait for, no timeline to plot. It is not the longest story ever told. It is the reality that exists before stories, beyond stories. It does not move. It does not grow old. It does not evolve. It simply is. And here, metaphor helps where language begins to falter. Picture an author sitting at their desk, pen in hand, gazing upon the pages of a book they've written. Inside the story, time unfolds. Characters are born, live, and die. Seasons change, nations rise and fall. There's a clear beginning and a definite end. But the author, outside the book, is not bound by the hours and days that pass within the story. They are present before the first word is ever written. They remain after the final period is placed. They are not confined to the world they created. They are not a part of its timeline. They transcend it. This is a glimpse, just a glimpse, of what it means for something to be eternal. And yet, even this metaphor bends under the weight of the reality it tries to illustrate. Because unlike the author, who was born and who will someday die, the truly eternal one has no such boundaries. No origin, no decay, no forward momentum, just perfect, changeless existence. And here lies a quiet but profound distinction. Timelessness is not the same as changelessness. Something could, theoretically, step out of time and remain unbound by its passing, yet still be different from moment to moment. But the eternal, the truly eternal, does not even change. There is no was and no will be. There is only is. And now listen. Feel the weight of this next thought. Imagine a presence that simply is, never learning, never adapting, never shifting mood or direction. Not because it is frozen or distant, but because it is utterly complete. It does not become better or worse. It does not awaken to new realizations. It does not react or adjust. It is already, always, everything it ever will be. There is something deeply unsettling about this at first. We are creatures of motion, of change, of growth. We expect things to start, to develop, to conclude. But this is a kind of stillness that defies our senses. A constant beyond comfort or discomfort. A being that doesn't need to change because it lacks nothing. It simply exists, full and entire, beyond the restless currents of time. And the more we sit with that idea, the more we let it wash over us, the more awe it inspires. Because in a universe where everything seems temporary, where everything we know eventually fades, the notion of an unchanging, unbeginning, never-ending presence is not just mysterious. It's sacred. It is the fixed point around which everything else turns. The source without a source. The truth without transition. To call it eternal is almost too small a word, but it's the best we have. What was God doing before creation? Before there was anything, before light, sound, or even the notion of a beginning, there was God. But what does that mean? What was God doing before creation? To even ask such a question is to stand on the edge of human language, peering into the abyss of a realm where before has no meaning. In the eternal stillness that precedes time, there was no ticking clock, no unfolding sequence, no then or later, only the infinite presence of God, unmeasurable, unfathomable, and without reference point. This question, so simple on its surface, has puzzled theologians and philosophers for centuries, and yet it refuses to go away. Perhaps that's because it's not just a curiosity. It's a deep yearning to understand our place in a mystery that began long before we were ever conscious of it. We try to stretch our minds back, beyond the edge of space, beyond the first moment light broke into the void, and we ask, what was there? Augustine of Hippo, one of Christianity's towering intellects, gave a response that seems at once profound and unsettling. God was not doing anything before creation, because time itself began with creation. There was no before. There was no timeline stretching endlessly into the past, no vacuum of waiting, no divine boredom. Just eternity, a mode of existence completely alien to ours, where all moments simply are and none arrive or depart. In Islamic theology, the question is approached not through the mechanics of time, but through reverence for divine transcendence. Allah, the one who exists outside the veil of comprehension, is always active, not in a way that resembles human labor or decision-making, but in a perfect, timeless will. His knowledge, his presence, his decree, they are not bound by clocks or calendars. There is no lapse, no pause, no anticipation. The divine will simply is, in all directions and none, without succession or delay. And then, there is the mystic thread of Kabbalah. Within the depths of Jewish mysticism, the infinite, Ein Sof, is described as a being of boundless, hidden potential. Before creation, Ein Sof was not idle, nor was it in motion. It existed in a kind of sacred stillness, where all realities were folded inward, like seeds yet to bloom. Not absence, but concealment. The universe, from this view, was not born out of nothing, but emerged from the veiled vastness of infinite light contracting upon itself, making room for something other than God to come into being. In that withdrawal, creation found its womb. Still, even with these insights, the mind rebels. We live in time. We breathe it, move in it, age because of it. So we grope for metaphors. Perhaps God was contemplating, resting, or waiting. But these are shadows of thought, not light. God is not bound by time's grammar. He does not prepare, anticipate, or evolve. If he acts from a place outside motion. If he creates, it is not the result of some process, but of sheer, eternal will. Picture it now. A vast, immeasurable stillness. No galaxies wheeling in the sky. No atoms humming with energy. No whisper of wind or flicker of flame. Just infinite presence. Endless potential. A silence deeper than silence. And then, not a sound, but a let there be. Not a spark, but a will unleashed. Reality unfolds not from chaos, but from the heart of intentionality. In that moment, time itself is born, not just the ticking of cosmic clocks, but the rhythm that makes history, memory, and longing possible. Perhaps we will never know what God was doing before creation, but maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe what matters is that, in his perfect freedom, he chose to create, not out of necessity, not because he lacked, but because it pleased him to reveal, to share, to invite. In that decision, the eternal kissed the temporal. Infinity made room for finitude. And in doing so, the story of all stories began.